Very good morning to all the participants. So again, we are going to discuss one more important topic under GST. Hope my audio, everything is fine, Prithvi?
Yes, sir. Very clear, sir.
Okay. See, you may be wondering, what is there much in transitional credit? Already the Delhi High Court has given its decision. So it is all about the Tran 1 filing, due date, extension, delay in filing Tran 1. To some extent, the issue has been settled by the Delhi High Court. And where is the need for having a session on transitional credit? The reason is the transitional credit is not only about the Tran 1 filing and the time extensions and the High Court decision. There is a lot more in transitional credit actually. In fact, many of the Tran 1 filed by the people, it is all yet to be verified by the department, and once they start the verification, they will be coming out with lot of issues on that. There is much more to the issue of transitional credit more than the filing of Tran 1 itself. There are various subsections dealing with different aspects of it. So unless we have a very thorough understanding of the whole concept of transitional credit, it will be difficult in our practice. So that is why this becomes one of the very important topic under GST. So I am aware today we have the participants from both ends. We have seasoned professionals who have a lot of experience in this field, as well as on the other hand, we also have the youngsters who want to learn. So to the extent possible, I will try to balance the requirements of both the people. So as I said in the chat box, even though all your audio will be muted during the session, you are at liberty to send your views and questions in the chat box. I will try to see them during the course of the presentation itself. So with that, we will just move on.
Sir, I'm sorry, sir, just one more small announcement. So I request all participants to kindly not to touch the screen sharing which is being done, because whatever you touch or whatever you scribble, it is viewable to everyone, and I cannot remove that. So I request all the participants once again not to touch the screen sharing option. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. See, as I said, the importance of transitional credit, the whole basis of it, you can understand from this particular picture. You can see the legacy law, that is the central excise, service tax, VAT, and everything is a sinking ship. And we had a lot of credit in the sinking ship, like our VAT ITC and SENVAT credit, everything. And everything has to be switched over to the new ship, which is having the flag of GST. So in the process, there may also be some casualties like the educational cess credit or secondary educational cess credit. So this picture will give you a fair idea about the subject which we are going to discuss now. So it's all about whatever credits we have earned under the old law, the legacy law, it has to be carried forward into the GST regime in a proper manner. What are the legal provisions in this regard? So what are all the safeguards which we have to take? And what are the normal litigation which are going around in this particular area? That is what we are going to see today. Now, if we refer to the legacy law, the credit entitlement was different for different set of people. So the whole idea of GST is to have a seamless credit mechanism. And if you see the legacy law, in case of a manufacturer, what are all the credits he can take? He can take credit of the excise duty paid on inputs and capital goods. He can take credit of the service tax paid on input services. And since he is also a VAT dealer, he can take credit of the VAT paid on inputs and capital goods. This is as far as a manufacturer is concerned. Coming to a service provider, he was eligible to take credit of the excise duties paid on inputs and capital goods, as well as service tax paid on input services. He cannot claim any credit for the VAT paid on inputs and capital goods. A service provider cannot take any credit for the VAT paid on the inputs and capital goods. This is as far as a service provider is concerned. Coming to a VAT dealer, he can take credit only for the VAT paid on his inputs and capital goods. Neither he can take any credit for the excise duty, nor he can take credit for any service tax paid. So these were all the bottlenecks which was leading to the cascading effect of taxes. And this is how the credit entitlement of different people was there under the S2I levy. So now, once we move into GST, all these artificial bottlenecks have been removed because GST is a single point taxation on the simultaneously by the central and the state government on the supply activity. The credit chain has merged. So we should have a lot of transitional provisions. And if you see the transitional provision, the statutory provisions, those are contained in Chapter 20 of both the Central GST Act as well as the State GST Act, Chapter 20. And Section 139 deals with the registration migration, about which we are not going to discuss anything today. And the important section is Section 140 and Rule 117. So these are very, very important as far as the transitional credits are concerned. Section 140 and Rule 117, both under Central GST Act as well as the State GST Act. This Rule 117 that talks about the filing of the Tran 1. And there was one sub-rule 1A introduced this to Rule 117, which provided that the time limit for filing this return can be extended. So as we all know, several times the time limits have been extended. And finally, the last date was 27/12/2017. So that was under sub-rule 1A of Rule 117. And there was one Rule 120 capital A, which talks about extending the time limit for revising the Tran 1. Once we have already filed a Tran 1, if there is any mistake, that can be revised. And for that also, the time limit was extended several times. And finally, it was 27/12/2017. Then we have Rule 141, read with Rule 119, that deals with job work related activities. It has got nothing to do with the credit, but it is all relating to the job work transactions. We also have Section 142, read with Rule 118, which contains lot of other miscellaneous transitional provisions. If time permits, we will touch upon those transitional provisions also. But as far as the transitional credit is concerned, provisions are contained in Section 140, read with Rule 117. Now, we will just get into Section 140. The various subsections of 140 deals with various situations. So what are all the situations in which a credit has to be carried forward from the legacy law to the GST law? There are various situations that have been contemplated, and each subsection deals with a different aspect. First, we will get into subsection 1. Subsection 1 deals with whatever credit has already been availed under the STY law and which was lying as a closing balance in our last return under the legacy law. For example, if I am a manufacturer, I will file my ER1. If it is a service provider, he will file his ST3 return. And if he is a VAT dealer, he will be filing his VAT return. So in all these returns, there will be closing balance of CENVAT credit or ITC credit available. So those closing balance have to be carried forward to the GST regime. There is one electronic credit ledger under GST. The closing balance of the old return should be carried forward to the GST as an opening balance. And subsection 1 deals with this particular aspect. So there are certain conditions prescribed. So the first condition is the assessee who wants to claim such a transition, they have to file their returns up to June 2017. There should not be any pendency in filing the old return. Up to June 2017, all old returns should have been filed. And whatever credit they want to carry forward, it should be an eligible credit under GST also. So it should not be prohibited for taking the credit under GST law. And like our CGST Act, the SGST Act also has similar provisions. Whatever provisions we are going to discuss now, everything will be similar under SGST Act also, except certain modifications which are required. For example, one important change in the provisions of SGST Act is about the pendency of various forms. We all know there is something called Form C, Form F. Form C deals with the interstate supplies, Form F stock transfers, Form H for export, and Form I for SEZ clearances. In all these cases, we would have paid either a concessional rate of CST or it would have been totally exempt. Either the CST would have been totally exempt. As on 1st July 2017, several of these forms would have been pending. So the forms would have been pending. Normally in practice, lot of time is given for producing the forms. Even though the statute prescribes a time limit, till the completion of the assessment, forms are being produced. So what the SGST Act says, when you are filing your transitional return, that is Tran 1, If any of these forms are pending with you, you have not received the forms, whether it is C form or F form or H or I, then in all these cases, the differential tax payable in respect of the pending forms, the differential tax, the tax payable in respect of all the pending forms should be reduced from your ITC balance. Here, I would like to point out a big issue, an issue of equity here. See, suppose we will take an example of two assessees, A and B. A is having ITC balance and B is not having any ITC balance. As on 30th June, A is having ITC balance in his VAT return. B is not having any ITC balance in his VAT return. He has used all the balance. He is not going to file any Tran 1. Both of them have effected sales under Form C, Form F, etc. And certain forms are pending. Certain forms are pending. The time limit is still there. The time limit for furnishing the forms are still available both for A as well as for B. Section 140, it creates an obligation on the person who is filing Tran 1, that is carrying forward the transitional credit, that even though the time limit is available, he has to pay the differential duty and reduce that amount from the transitional credit. Whereas another person, just because he is not having any ITC balance, he is not required to do anything. Of course, by the time limit, if he is not able to produce finally, he will also be liable. But my point is, why to penalize only a person who is having an ITC balance? This is only temporary. Later, if you are able to get the forms, they can always file a refund claim and get it. But the differential treatment has been prescribed between two similarly placed persons, one having an ITC, the other one not having an ITC, which I feel definitely it is an anomaly which we have to look upon it. Or is there any other rationale? In fact, I should thank many of my practitioners in the field of VAT, especially Mr. Mohammed Shafiq, with whom I had a lot of discussions on understanding this particular aspect of the transitional credit. So still, I feel that there is an anomaly in this particular regard. Only those people who are having an ITC balance, they are made to forego and reduce their differential duty liability for the pending forms. Whereas another person who is not having any ITC balance, he need not do anything till he is getting the forms. So this is a broad outline about subsection 1 of section 140. It deals with carrying forward the closing balance of SENVAT credit or ITC under the old regime to the new regime. So it is just about carrying forward the closing balance from the old return to the new return. This is as far as subsection 1 is concerned. Now, we will move on to subsection 2. Subsection 2 deals with a different situation. As we all know, the taxes paid on capital goods is also eligible for credit. Whether it is excise duty or VAT, the taxes paid on capital goods is also eligible for credit. And both the SENVAT credit rules as well as the VAT law, it was giving the credit in installment. We cannot take the entire credit on capital goods immediately. As per the SENVAT credit rules, it was 50-50. And VAT law, different provisions in different states. In some places, it was 2 years. In some places, it was 3 installments like that. So subsection 2 deals with, if you have received any capital goods in earlier years, and if any part of that credit is remaining to be availed. For example, capital goods were purchased during 14-15 or 15-16, only 50% credit was taken. The remaining 50% credit was not taken. So that remaining credit can be taken through Tran 1. Sometimes under SENVAT credit rules, it is not compulsory that I should take 50% in the first year. I need not take anything in the first year. Second year, I can take 100%. So in such cases, the entire credit can be taken in the second year. Even though in one of the flyers, it has been said, if you have not taken 100% in the first year, you cannot take the entire 100% in Tran 1. I feel that it is not correct. Whatever is the unavailed portion of the credit, unavailed portion of the capital goods credit can be claimed by filing Tran 1. So subsection 2 deals with taking unavailed portion of capital goods credit. So please remember, subrule 1 deals with credit has already been availed. Credit has already been availed and closing balance as per the old return to be carried forward under GST. Subrule 2 deals with capital goods credit, which has not been availed under the earlier law. The remaining installments under the capital goods. So that has to be claimed under subsection 2. Now we will move on to subsection 3, which is very, very important. So a lot of disputes are going around under this particular subsection. So we have to understand what this subsection is all about. So now this particular subsection deals with the credits which have not been availed under the old law. Because of some restrictions, certain credits were not eligible under the old law for various reasons. But after GST, we are eligible for such credits. So how to avail such a credit? Please note the difference between subsection 1 and subsection 3. Subsection 1 deals with the credit which has already been availed and lying in the balance. And subsection 3 deals with a credit which has not been availed, which was not eligible under the old law for various reasons. After GST, those credits have become eligible. So how to claim that particular credit? The subsection 3 deals with that. So there are certain cases. I will give one by one. So this is applicable for a person who was not at all registered under the earlier law. See, under central excise, there was a 1.5 crore exemption, small scale exemption. So suppose somebody's turnover was below 1.5 crore. He has not been registered. He has not taken any CENVAT credit. But under GST, the threshold is only 20 lakhs. So he has to be registered. So when he obtains a registration under GST, he will be having lot of inputs in hand. Whatever has been purchased under the old regime, some inputs will be in the work in progress. Some inputs would have been converted into final product and lying in stock. So the inputs will be in 3 forms: lying as such, contained in work in progress, or contained in final product. So the taxes paid on those inputs are eligible for that person, because after 1/7/2017, whenever he is going to effect any sale, he is going to pay GST. He was not liable to be registered under the old law. Similarly, under VAT law also, if suppose somebody's turnover is below the threshold limit, he would not have availed any credit. But once he obtains registration under GST, the duties paid on the inputs lying in stock. 140 subsection 3 deals with only the duties paid on inputs lying in stock. Lying in stock means in 3 forms: lying as such, contained in work in progress, and contained in final product. So we have to quantify that particular credit and we can take. So this is one example who was not registered under the old law. The second category of person was a person who was manufacturing exempted goods or providing exempted services. He might have been registered for some other product, and he may be manufacturing some other product which are exempted, and he would not have taken any credit for that raw materials. Similarly, if somebody is rendering any exempted service, either he would not have obtained any registration, or even if he has a registration for this particular service, he would not have taken any input credits at all. So he can also take credit under 143. The third category of persons covered under this particular subsection is a works contract service provider availing notification under 26 of 2012. This has got a problem. It will be discussed in the next slide. I will come to that in the next slide. And the next category of persons are first stage dealer, second stage dealers, depot, importer. So all these people were registered under the old law, but they will be only passing on the credit. They are not liable to pay any tax. They will just pass on the credit. But after GST, they become a supplier. So whatever stock they have in their hand, they can take the credit under 143. So please note, all these situations are with reference to taking credit for the inputs on hand. Also note, you might have already taken credit for some inputs under the old law. They may be lying. You cannot take it once again. Only those inputs for which we have not taken credit under the old law for various reasons which I have explained so far, those inputs alone we can take the credit. And another important term we have to note, this particular subsection uses the word eligible duties. Please note, this word is very, very important. We will deal with it later. So eligible duties paid on inputs. Inputs means inputs lying in stock, work in progress, or contained in the final product can be claimed under subsection 3 of section 140. Now, I was telling about this work contract service provider. See, under work contract, there will be two category of people. So if you take the case of a construction of an apartment, normally in states like Tamil Nadu, the undivided share of the land will be sold separately. A separate sale agreement will be entered, sale deed will be entered for sale of the land. And for the construction, a separate construction agreement will be entered. That construction agreement is a work contract by itself. A construction agreement will be a work contract, and they have two options. Either they can pay under composition scheme, or there was a rule called Rule 2A. 60% is treated as value of the goods and 40% is treated as value of services. So most of the people, especially from the southern states, were following this particular model. Either they will be under Rule 2A or they will be under the composition scheme. This notification 26, that will be applicable for a different type of model. If you move northwards, like Bombay and all, the model of sale is totally different. Once you book an apartment, you will enter into an agreement, and the entire value, a sale deed will be at the time of handing over the apartment, it will be registered for the entire value, and stamp duty will be paid on the entire value. So it will be an immovable property transaction. So that was also deemed as a service. If huge amount is received, it was also deemed as a service. There, the total value paid by the buyer will include the land value also. Whereas in our model, the construction agreement will not include the land value, because land value is separately available in the sale deed. Whereas in northern models, the land value is also part of sale consideration. So under notification 26 of 12, a higher abatement has been prescribed. 75% was given as an abatement. So subsection 3 mentions only about those people, those work contract service provider who are operating under notification 26 of 2012. Does it mean that all the work contract service providers in Tamil Nadu who are following either Rule 2A or the composition scheme, they are not at all eligible to take any transitional credit? So that is the interpretation being given in some places, and in fact some show cause notices have also been already issued, but that is not correct. The specific mention of that particular category of people does not mean that all other category of people are totally excluded. In fact, we can cover them under a different category also. So those work contract service providers, they were never registered under the excise law earlier. They were never registered under excise law. They are not manufacturers. So if not under this particular category, they will fall under the other category who are not registered under the S2I law. And so the excise duty paid on the cement and steel, they can avail credit under that particular category. So this is one potential area where there are a lot more disputes are going to come in future. So this 140 subsection 3 prescribes various conditions. So those conditions are, when this credit is taken for the inputs lying in stock, it should be used after 1/7/2017 for making taxable supplies. If you are going to use that input and manufacture a particular product which is exempted under GST, we cannot take any credit. So those inputs should be used for taxable supplies under GST. And whatever inputs we are taking credit under 143, it should not be prohibited under the GST law. It should be an eligible credit under GST law also. And another important condition is, whatever stock for which we are taking the credit, we should have duty paying documents. We should have purchase invoices indicating the excise duty or VAT paid on that particular material. And those invoices should not be more than 1 year old. GST came into effect from 1st July 2017. So those invoices for the stock lying on 1/7/2017 should have been purchased on or after 1/7/2016. Hope it is very clear. When you are taking credit for the inputs lying in stock, under subsection 140, subsection 3 of section 140, the duty paid document should be available, and those duty paid documents should be within 1 year. But this condition has been struck down by the Gujarat High Court. In the case of Philco trade, they said you cannot put such a kind of a restriction. Even though the inputs have been purchased more than 1 year ago, whatever inputs are lying in stock as on 1/7/2017, without any time limit, the credit should be allowed. This is the decision of the Gujarat High Court, which has struck down that particular condition. And another condition is, whatever good, this is rather, I don't think any abatements are available under GST, but still the outward supply should not suffer any abatement. So all these conditions have to be satisfied, and Tran 1 is required. For all transitional credit, filing of Tran 1 is important. Each table of Tran 1 will deal with a different situation. So these are all the conditions under subsection 3 of section 140. So I said, to claim any credit under subsection 3, you should have a duty paying document. That is one of the essential conditions. But many times it will be difficult to comply with, because take for example, a person who was not at all registered under the old law, he might not have prescribed, he might not have kept all purchase invoices, or all the people need not have purchased the goods directly from the manufacturer. I might have purchased it from the market, so I don't have any duty paying document. Similarly, at the first point of sale, once VAT is suffered, at the second point, there may be some exemption, and I might have purchased the goods from more than second stage or third stage. So I may not have any duty paid document. So how to give transitional credit for those people? Even though subsection 3 says you should have a valid duty paying document for taking the credit, it also gives certain leeway. There are 2 options prescribed for taking credit, even though you do not have a duty paying document. Please, once again, I am making it very clear. There is a distinction between subsection 1 and subsection 3. Subsection 1 deals with the credit which is already availed and carrying forward the balance, and subsection 3 deals with the credit which was not availed earlier, but we are availing it after introduction of the GST, and again this pertains to the inputs lying in stock. So I should have a duty paying document. Suppose if I don't have any duty paying document, what can I do? 2 options are given. Both these options are available only for traders. A manufacturer or a service provider, they don't have any other option. They can take credit under subsection 3 only if they have a duty paying document. Only for traders, these 2 options are available. The options are, those goods should not have been totally exempt under central excise or VAT. See, I have a lot of inputs on my hand on which I have not taken any credit, but those goods were exempted under GST, excise and VAT. So I am not eligible for any transitional credit. So the first condition is, those goods should not have been exempted absolutely under, there may be a conditional exemption, but that is not material. It should not have been absolutely exempted under central excise law or VAT law. And there should be some purchase document. You need not have a duty paying document, but there should be some purchase document available. And how this credit is given? So there is a mechanism. So first, what we have to do, we have to quantify how much inputs we have without duty paying documents. Whoever is eligible to take credit under subsection 3, how much quantity of inputs are available as on 1/7/2017. We have to quantify the inputs, quantify the quantum of input and declare it in our Tran 1. So the quantity and value should be declared in Tran 1. Then out of that input, we will be selling. Again, it is available only for trader, not for manufacturer. So he will be selling it as such. He will not be using it and manufacturing any other product, because this facility itself is available only for a trader. So from out of the stock for which he wants to take credit under subsection 3, he will be effecting sale after 1st July 2017. So July, August, September, October, November, December. Next 6 months, he will be selling from out of that particular stock. While selling that stock, he will be paying GST. So what is the GST rate on that? Either it may be 18% or more, or it may be 5% or 12%. So 2 categories, 18% or more GST attracting goods, or GST attracting below 18%. Like that, 2 category has to be made. So if the GST rate, that is the CGST rate, is more than 9%, similar provision is available under VAT law also. So we will take it together. So, or we will deal with separately. So if the CGST rate on those goods is 9% or more, you will get credit for 60% of that 9%, which will come to 5.4%. Please follow it very carefully. I will be having stock on which I want to take credit under section 143. I will be having 1000 units. From out of the 1000 units, July 17, I have sold 100. Every month I have sold 100. So 6 months I have sold 600. Remaining 400 I am not able to sell. So the first point is I will be eligible to take credit only for the 600 units. Even though I have stock of 1000, I can take credit only for whatever I was able to sell in the first 6 months, 600 units. On the 600 units, I have paid 18% GST, 9% CGST. So on sale, I have paid 9% CGST. So my credit will be 5.4% on the sale value. That is 60% of 9%. Suppose if the goods are attracting less than 9%, 12%, then my credit will be 40%. If it is 6% CGST, 40% of 6%, which will come to 4 into 60, 2.4%, I will be eligible. In case of interstate, that is IGST, it will be 30%, 20%. Similar provision is available under VAT also, but VAT, the situation was this benefit can be claimed where the goods have suffered VAT at the first point of sale, and second point of sale it was exempted, and somebody has purchased in the second stage. So definitely he will not be having any duty paid document. So please note, this option is available only for traders, not for manufacturers and service providers. This will, if you have the duty paying document, you will go by the main section. If you have an excise duty invoice or a VAT invoice, under the main provision, you can take the actual credit. This provision will be applicable only if you don't have a duty paid document evidencing the quantum of tax paid. And how the credit will be determined, it is based on the sales effected during the first 6 months and what is the rate of GST paid on those goods. And if it is 9% or more, 60% of that rate. And if it is below 9%, 40% of that. So this is one particular option. So I think it would have been clear, right? Okay. Prithvi, are there any important questions in the chat box? I'm not able to see that.
No, sir. Till now, I've not got any questions. I think it is all going very
good. Okay. Now, coming to the next option. This is a limited option. It will be available only in certain cases. It is dealt with under a central excise notification. Many people would not have noticed that this particular option is available because it is not notified under any by way of any GST notification. This procedure has been prescribed by a central excise notification 20 and 21 of 2017. This will apply only in certain cases. That is, the value of individual item of stock is more than 25,000 rupees per piece. I'll give some examples also. More than 25,000 rupees per piece. And second, those goods are branded goods and it can be related to the manufacturer. It should be relatable to the manufacturer through a brand name. And again, it should be identifiable with reference to some part number and all. Part number. Then I'll give an example. Suppose there is a car dealer or a television dealer. A television dealer, he is having a stock of television sets manufactured by, say, for example, LG. He is having stock of LG TV. He is a dealer. But he has not purchased these goods directly from the factory of LG. So he don't have an excise invoice. He would have purchased it either from a wholesale dealer or from some other location who have not issued an excise invoice. So he wants to take the benefit of this particular provision. So the first condition, the sale value of one particular TV should be more than 25,000, satisfied. Second, it is identifiable to the manufacturer through a brand name. Yes, LG or Samsung brand name is there. And the next condition is the manufacturer would have paid either excise duty or if he is an importer, CVD. That should be relatable with a reference to a serial number. So we know all this technical product, it comes with a unique serial number. So if a particular dealer is having a stock of one particular TV, you just check what is the serial number, or if it is a car, you check the chassis number or the engine number, and then you can relate it to the manufacturer's invoice, because the manufacturer's invoice will also have that particular serial number. So we can always relate it. I'll just stop 1 minute. I'll just finish this and I will stop for the query. So we can always find out how much tax was paid by the original manufacturer. So in such cases, we can request the original manufacturer to issue a credit transfer document, CTD. So we can request the supplier, please issue a credit transfer document. You mention the serial number of the product, you mention your original invoice number, and tell me how much excise duty you have paid or how much VAT you have paid upon the first sale. Based on that credit transfer document, I can take credit, because I don't have a credit duty paying document right now, but I can get a credit transfer document from the original manufacturer or the first VAT dealer. So through that credit transfer document, so here there is another return which has to be filed. Tran 2, earlier slide we have seen 6 month sale, I can claim credit. For the 6 months sale affected, I can claim credit. For that option, apart from Tran 1, another return has to be filed, that is called Tran 2. The previous slide, whatever we have seen in the previous slide, apart from declaring the stock in Tran 1, for the 6 months sales affected, I have to file a return called Tran 2. Now, coming to this option, if I am claiming credit under credit transfer document, then Tran 3 has to be filed. Who has to file? Both the parties have to file. Suppose, for example, I am asking LG to give me a credit transfer document. LG should file Tran 3 and they have to fill up one particular table. These are all the credit transfer document I have issued to various dealers. And from my point, I have to declare these are all the credit transfer document I have received from LG. So both will be matched by the system. So now, just a brief recap on subsection 3. Subsection 3 will come into play when we want to take credit for the inputs lying in stock for which we have not taken credit earlier for various reasons. And we should have a duty paying document to claim credit under subsection 3. If we are not having any duty paying document, two options are available. These options are available only for trader, not for a manufacturer or service provider. The first option is applicable for the sales affected in the first 6 months after GST at the rate of 60% or 40% of the GST paid. The second method is by getting a credit transfer document from the original manufacturer, and this will apply only for high value goods where the value is more than 25,000 and which are linked to the original manufacturer through serial number and brand name. So thus we are covering subsection 3. And what is that query, Prithvik?
So yes, I'll just forward that query.
Yeah, I'll read it. Yes. If we have some capital goods for which ITC was not available, as we were under RCM under service tax, but after GST we are in forward charge. 1 minute. After we are in for, can we charge capital goods? What is ITC? See, for taking credit under 140 subsection 2, one of the condition is that credit should be available under the old law also. So the answer to your query is, when you are not eligible to take any credit for that capital goods under the old law, take the case of my own case. I am an advocate. Even under GST, we are advocate under RCM. So that is not a valid. Anyway, if you are not eligible to take credit for the capital goods under the old regime, you cannot claim it through Tran 1. So subsection 2 also has a condition. The eligibility should be there under the old law also. And there is one more query. One of my client was registered with excise and had a balance of excise credit of 7. Since the factory was closed, transaction was not until date. But now in March 20, they applied for first registration. No option. They are saying that the question is there for everyone. So everybody can read. Madam, now you have a hope because of the Delhi High Court judgment. We'll be dealing with a little later. So I will deal with that at that particular point of time. We'll just proceed with this. I will answer it when I deal with the Delhi High Court judgment. Now, moving forward.
Sir, I'm sorry, sir. There's one more quick query, sir. I've sent it to you.
Yeah, just a minute. Can we find one more Tran 1 for credits business? Yes, this I will address, sir. I will address finally. After dealing with the Delhi High Court judgment, I will come to this also. Okay. Now, we'll move on. Subsection 4. Subsection 4 deals with the case. Suppose under the old law, I may be manufacturing both dutiable goods and exempted goods. Or I may be providing both taxable service as well as exempted service. So, how this rule subsection 4 will operate? See, if I am manufacturing dutiable goods and taxable services, whatever directly used for manufacture of dutiable goods, I would have already taken the credit. Whatever inputs and input services exclusively used for exempted goods, I am not eligible. Under Rule 6, if any inputs or input services are used exclusively for making exempted supply, then credit is not eligible. So, we would not have taken any credit, and there will be common inputs and common input services where we have already taken the credit and we will be reversing it proportionately under Rule 6. So, subsection 4 deals with those cases. It is a combination of subsection 1 and subsection 3. So, anybody who is doing both taxable as well as exempted activity, whatever credit you have already taken, you can carry forward under subsection 1. And whatever credit you have not taken, you can do it under subsection 3. So, subsection 4 is a combination of 1 and 3. If you are doing both taxable activity as well as exempted activity, whatever credit you have already taken, carried forward under subsection 1, and whatever credit you are not eligible to take earlier, and now you can take it under 143. So, it's a combination of subsection 1 and 3. This is subsection 4. Coming to subsection 5, it deals with in transit. So, many people would have dispatched the goods during the last week or last month of June 2017. You will be receiving the goods only in July, but all those goods would have been suffering excise duty and VAT. Similarly, you paid advance for service, and that person would have received, that person would have paid service tax, because service tax is payable even on advances, but you are receiving the services only after 1/7/2017. So, this we can call it as services in transit. So, we cannot imagine goods in transit is possible. How service in transit? It is possible like this. On advances, service tax was paid, but service was received after 1/7/2017. So, in those cases, even though the tax was paid like excise or service tax, credit can be taken through Tran 1. So, that is under subsection 5. Please note very carefully, all this will become very, very relevant going forward. Now, coming to subsection 6, that will deal with the cases under excise law. Certain goods were attracting compounded levy, like aluminium putties and pattas, stainless steel putties and pattas. Those goods were not eligible for any CENVAT credit, and tax is payable at a flat rate, 50 rupees per kg, something like that. So, those people would not have taken any CENVAT credit earlier, and they can take credit under subsection 6 for the inputs lying in stock. So, subsection deals with those cases where earlier law, they were paying some specific rate of duty, like compounded scheme or something like that. And subsection 7, that deals with, there was a concept of input service distributor, even earlier also in cross charge, we have seen it in greater detail. So, that input service distributor, if he receives any service tax invoices after 1/7/2017, he continued to receive some service tax invoices. Those service tax can be distributed as CGST. So, this is as far as subsection 7 is concerned. And subsection 8 deals with, under service tax, a person may have a centralized registration. For the entire country, he might have obtained one centralized registration. But under GST, there is no centralized registration. It is all independent registration. So, the centralized registration, there will be only one CENVAT credit balance. So, now under subsection 8, the total balance available with that person can be either retained in the same place or it can be distributed to all registration. No formula. It's all our own understanding. We can, if you want to distribute, we can distribute. If we don't want to distribute, we can keep it at one place. So, this provision is exclusively for the people who are having the centralized registration under the service tax law. And subsection 9 deals with another situation. So, under the CENVAT credit rules, you take credit, you have to make payment to the service provider within 6 months. We also have similar provision under GST. So under the service tax provisions, earlier law, you might have taken credit for some services. If you have not paid within 6 months to the service provider, you have to reverse the credit. You have to reverse the credit. After GST, if you are making the payment within 3 months, that is July, August, September, if you are making the payment within 3 months, then you can take back the credit through Tran 1. So subsection 9 deals with wherever you have reversed credit under the old law, because you have not paid the consideration to the service provider within 6 months period, you can take the credit after GST if you are making the payment within 3 months. If you make the payment after 3 months, you cannot take back the credit. This is one situation which has been provided, and there are more such situations. There are no answers. This has not been provided. For example, if you are sending the goods to your job worker, if it is not coming back within 180 days, you have to reverse the credit under the old law. So you have reversed. After GST, you are getting back the goods. And you take back the credit, no express provisions are available. Similarly, you are writing off the value of the inputs under the old law. Even if you write off only 10% of the value, you have to reverse the credit under the old law. And after GST, you are writing it back. You are using the input, you are using that particular input. How to take back that particular credit? This is also not provided for. So they thought of one particular situation and they have provided for it, and they have not provided for the other contingencies. And now the term eligible duties has been defined by way of two explanations, explanation 1 and explanation 2. So from now onwards, we are entering into little complex phase of this particular provisions. We will see there are two explanations for the term eligible duties. You may observe the term eligible duties is not used in subsection 1, which deals with carrying forward the old balance. There they are only saying that ITC or Senvat credit, no eligible duties. There is some subsequent amendment. I will come to that later. So now the word eligible duties is used in subsection 3, 4, 5 and 6. If you go to these subsections, all these sections deals with taking credit for the inputs lying in stock. Subsection 3 deals with I am a not registered person. I was not taking credit earlier. Now I can take the credit for the stock. Subsection 4 deals with the situation I am a manufacturer of both dutiable and exempted goods. Wherever I have not taken credit for exempted goods, input lying in stock, I can take. Subsection 5 deals with goods in transit and services in transit. And subsection 6 deals with specific rate of duty and compounded scheme, something like that. So all these subsection deals with taking credit for the inputs lying in stock as on 1/7/2017. So please note. So because these subsections deals with stock in hand, the eligible duty is also defined accordingly. Eligible duty means excise duty, CVD, additional excise duty paid on the inputs lying in stock. So these explanations will refer to excise duty, CVD, and under SGST it will be VAT and entry tax paid on goods lying in stock. Goods lying in stock means lying as such, contained in WIP, contained in final product. So all these subsections deals with goods in stock. So the definition of eligible duty. So first explanation deals with 3, 4 and 6. And second explanation deals with 5. Why we need two explanation? That is because under subsection 6, goods, services in transit is also covered. Under subrule 6, you paid advance for services before 1/7. He paid service tax and service is received only after 1/7. So you can take credit only for after 1/7/2017. So this is something called services in transit. So the second explanation also covered service tax paid. That is the difference between explanation 1 and explanation 2. So please note, both these definition will refer to the taxes paid on inputs lying in stock. That is very important. Now, there is a story of educational cess. Whether the balance of educational cess and secondary educational cess is eligible to be carried forward or not. This is a big story, more bigger than the grandma's story to the grandchildren. So now, a little background. There was some taxes called educational cess and secondary educational cess payable on excise duty, service tax, as well as customs. So this educational cess and secondary education cess is eligible for credit under the old law. You can take the credit, but you can use it only for paying the same educational cess or secondary education cess. So if you take education cess credit, you can use it only for paying educational cess. Similarly, if you take secondary education cess, you can use it only for paying the secondary education cess. And at some point of time, the education cess and secondary education cess on excise duty was exempted from 1/3/2015. From 1/3/2015, the education cess on excise duty was exempted. And this is what the finance minister at that time, Mr. Arun Jaitley, he said in the budget. As part of the movement towards GST, I propose to subsume the education cess and the secondary and higher education cess in central excise duty. In effect, the general rate of excise duty of 12.36, that is 12% is excise, 0.24 is education cess, and 0.12 is the secondary education cess. Cess is being rounded off to 12.5%. If you round it off, it will come only to 12. What is this? This is what the finance minister has said. And on service tax, the educational cess was removed from 1/6/2015. And the relevant provision is section 153 and 159 of the Finance Act, read with notification 14. And simultaneously, service tax rate was also revised from 12.36 to 14. Here, see the round off. 12.36 has become 14. So this is the way how the finance minister has understood rounding off. So we understand everything has been subsumed into single central excise duty and service tax as a move towards moving to notification was issued under central excise. So the question was, what will happen at that point? All the people having balance of education cess and secondary education cess, what will happen to that? The law was silent. And you cannot use it for paying excise duty. You cannot use it for paying service tax because you can use it only for paying education cess. And there is no education cess after this date. So all the balance was lying in the return. And it was just being carried forward. And then government, they give partial relief. They said, if you have received any input services after this particular date, that is 1/3/2015, that is the date on which education cess was exempted. So if you continue to receive some excisable goods where inputs, capital goods and services where education cess was paid, that alone can be used for paying your excise duty. Not your balance lying, not the closing balance lying as on 1/3/2015, but whatever goods you are. Is there any problem on the video?
So the video is getting stuck, sir, and audio is also getting stuck. I request all the participants to kindly turn off their videos, please, because once we turn off, the bandwidth problem will not be there. So I request all the participants to again kindly turn off their videos or cameras so that the speaker can have his audio and video clear. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, this notification, it allowed only those education cess paid on the goods received after 1/3/2015. That alone you can use for paying the excise duty, and they are silent about the balance lying as on 1/3/2015. Now the question is, our question, all the assessees' question was, can the balance of education cess and secondary education cess as on 1st July 2017 can be carried forward? So you have to add KK cess also, Krish Kalyan cess also, you have to add. That is also the same story. You may have to add that also. So our argument was, all the assessees, they all argued, credit is a vested right. Once I take the credit, which is an eligible credit, it is a vested right. And Supreme Court has said in Eicher Motors case also the same thing. So once it is a vested right, that should also be allowed to have been carried forward. As a CGST balance, you should allow it for paying the GST. That should have been done. And the very purpose of abolishing education cess, as per the finance minister, is to subsume all the taxes for moving into GST. And how can you say that you cannot carry forward the balance? And this credit balance was not lapsed. there was no clear provision for lapsing of the credit. Whether lapsing can be done or not, that is also a different issue, but there were no provisions. And government itself allowed, to some limited extent, you allowed to utilize the education cess for payment of excise duty. Why not allow for the remaining balance also? So these were all the balance, the arguments put forward by the assessees. And our High Court was, our Madras High Court was the first High Court to pronounce a decision on this particular aspect. In the case of Sutherland Global, our High Court has passed an order. So the High Court observed the following. The High Court observed the credit has not been lapsed. You have not brought any provision saying that whatever credit balance of education cess will lapse upon introduction of GST. So you have not done that. And 140 subsection 1 does not deal with eligible duties. It only says the balance of CENVAT credit can be carried forward. There is no word eligible duty. So the definition of eligible duty cannot be applied here. And Supreme Court has said in Eicher Motor case, credit is a vested right. So how can you on one point of day suddenly say that you are not eligible for taking the credit? And in Sutherland, it was a case covered under subsection 8 also. They were having the centralized registration. They are carrying forward the credit. So if not under subsection 1, they are covered under subsection 8 also, where the word used is only CENVAT credit. They don't say anything about eligible. So either under subsection 141 or under subsection 140, subsection 8 of 140, that the credit is allowed. And the High Court has also referred to some retrospective amendments. We will come to that. What are those retrospective amendments? We will also come to that. So these are all the observations. But what the government's argument was, there was one tariff conference of all the chief commissioners, and they have issued one communication saying that the balance of education cess cannot be carried forward. This is a policy decision taken by the government. They also relied upon another judgment of Delhi High Court, where the Cellular Operators Association, they wanted the government to permit the balance of education cess should be allowed for payment of service tax. That was struck down. The High Court did not allow. So the government relied on that. And the government also relied on the retrospective amendments carried in section 140. And we are very happy. And both the counsels who argued this case must have been present in our session today. Maybe Raghavan may also be present today, and Aparna Madam also may be present today. And finally, Sutherland, the judgment has been given. And I understand government has filed a writ appeal also, which is pending. Now, this is what the retrospective amendment carried out by the government. So what the government thought, the intention of the government is very clear. They don't want to allow this particular credit. That education cess credit cannot be allowed to be carried forward. So government seems to be very firm on that. So they made some retrospective amendments. So what they did, in subsection 1, they added the word eligible duties. In subsection 1, they added the word eligible duties. The High Court said the word eligible duty is not there in subsection 1. So they added eligible duties under subsection 1 with retrospective effect. Second, there were two explanations. I said in first explanation is for subsection 3, 4, 6. They added subsection 1 also. So the definition under explanation 1 for the term eligible duty, they added subsection 1 also, second arrow. And in the second definition, explanation 2, which was for subsection 5, they added subsection 1. Everywhere they added subsection 1. Not only that, they added one more explanation, explanation 3. For removal of doubts, it is hereby clarified that the expression eligible duties and taxes excludes any cess which has not been specified in explanation 1 by way of abundant caution. When you go out on a raining day, you can take one umbrella, but they are taking one raincoat, one umbrella, another small umbrella, one bigger umbrella. So they wanted to plug all the loopholes, and they made all these amendments, all of them with retrospective effect. But the problem is, even after so much of precaution, the umbrella was still having some leakages. We will see that later. So there was a fox pass. There was a fox pass committed by the government. So that was, you see, in explanation 1, I have already explained, that is the definition for eligible duty. for the purpose of subsection 3, 4, 6. And explanation 2 is for the purpose of subsection 5. Both deals with taking credit only for the inputs lying in stock. So, if you add subsection 1 to that definition, what will happen? I have taken Senvan credit under the old law. I have 1 crore balance. But I have used all my inputs. I have manufactured, I have sold all my product, but still I have balance of credit in my ER1 or ST3. I want to carry it forward under subsection 1. But if you apply the amended definition of eligible duties, I cannot carry forward that entire 1 crore. Out of that 1 crore, how much is attributable for the inputs lying in stock? I may not have any input, or I may have only some limited input. So, the right, they need not have included. They went to overboard. They need not have made this particular amendment at all. So, because subsection 1 is inserted in explanation 1 and explanation 2, it affects the credit entitlement under subsection 1. So, under subsection 1, it was an eligible credit. I have already taken the credit. The entire balance should be allowed to be carried forward without any reference to whatever stock I am having, because subsection 3, 4, 5, 6, all those deals with the credit which was not taken, but taking it after 1/7/2017. So that is how it refer always to the goods lying in stock. But for subsection 1, goods lying in stock is totally irrelevant. So if this explanation, if this amendment was given effect to, then the intention will be defeated. So this is the fox pass. And so they wanted to cover up. Once again, you cannot go to the parliament. You cannot say, no, we have committed some mistake and we have to amend. How many times we will go? Already these issues are very, very complex. So you have to make the entire parliament to understand all this. So what is the way out? They found out a simple way out as a face-saving measure. So what they did, they have not notified the amendments. Whatever amendments, it will create the problem. So any amendment, it will come into effect from the date to be notified, unless otherwise specified. So while fixing the date of bringing into effect, they said, read it very carefully, except the underlined portion, except subclass 1 of class B and subclass 1 of class C. Only these two provisions. Please note, subclass 1 of class B, subclass 1 of class C of section 28. What is that? I'll go back to the previous slide. Just a minute. Yes. Second arrow, subclass B, subclass 1, subclass 1 of class B and subclass 1 of class C. Both of these refer to including the subsection 1 in the definition of explanation 1 and explanation 2. So these two amendments were not notified and other amendments were all notified. Explanation 3 has come into effect and the first amendment, including the word eligible duties in explanation, that has come into effect. Only the second arrow and third arrow, they have not notified by way of a face-saving measure. So now, what will happen after that? Whether Sutherland will hold good even after this, what will happen to explanation 3? So all these are issues which we have to wait and see. But if you read the finding of Sutherland by our Madras High Court, it is very categorical. They have not given the benefit just because the provisions have not been notified. On the one hand, they said 148 covers. So wherever the credit is also claimed under subsection 8, that will stand because no amendment has been made into subsection 8. And they have also held on a substantial law, once credit is a vested right, in the absence of any lapsing provision, you cannot curtail the benefit. So that is the substantial finding of the High Court. So even after taking into effect these retrospective amendments, in my humble view, there may be different views possible, but in my humble view, even after these retrospective amendments, the ratio of Sutherland will prevail. Now, there are certain major issues in transitional credit which are bothering the associates. One is, you find out after 1st July, you have not paid some service tax under RCM. The department audit finds out, you pay now. How can you take credit? Have you paid it earlier? You could have taken tran credit, but now if you pay, how to take the credit? Another issue is the service tax on ocean freight. That is another major bombshell. So many people have not paid. So if you pay it now, how to take the credit? And for technical glitches, the time limit has been extended. I will come to the Delhi High Court judgment. Under Sub-Rule 1A, whoever has faced any technical glitches, they extended the time limit up to 31st March 2020. But many people have just not filed the Tran 1. These are all very highly complex provisions. Many people have not understood it properly. They committed a lot of mistakes. They don't have any technical evidence. We also heard on cyber law. So how to prove a record through technical evidence? It is very, very difficult. And Tran 1 filed, but I omitted certain credit. What can I do? I filed the Tran 1, but I have not filed the Tran 2. I have not filed the Tran 3. So all type of cases we have. Lot of writs are being filed throughout the country. So all these are issues which in future have to be resolved. So these are all the issues which will be keeping us engaged in the coming times. So after seeing all this, now this is what the position of analysis. He wants to carry so much of a baggage. These are all the transitional credit, but he don't know where to go. The ultimate destination is GST. He has to reach, but sometimes he may have to rush to High Court. Sometimes he may have to make a representation to the GST Council so that the heavy luggage, he will be able to land safely in the GST transitional credit. So now you will understand the importance of the subject of transitional credit. Now we will move on. So the future is not so bleak. The courts are always there to come to the rescue of the people. Now we will see some of the important judgments. There are a lot of judgments on Tran. So some of the important judgments are one judgment by the Punjab and High Court Adferty Technologies. So it's a very detailed judgment. They said the time limit prescribed under Rule 1117 is not very sacrosanct. It is only a procedural thing, and you should allow the people to file to rectify the return. To that effect, the decision, the SLP filed by the department was also dismissed by the Honorable Supreme Court. Another important decision is by Gujarat High Court, Siddharth Enterprises, and there also it has been allowed. And review petition is also dismissed. And one more by Punjab and High Court judgment by Hansraj Sons. And to top it all, the recent decision last week, we had this Brand Equity Treaties Limited. So what is special about this particular judgment is they have recorded in so many words that the credit is a vested right which is protected under Article 300A of the Constitution, and such right cannot be curtailed by prescribing a time limit. So people should be allowed to file Tran 1. It is not only to be limited, to technical glitches where you have not filed at all or wherever you have committed, because the GST law was so complex and even the GST portal was not functioning up to the mark. So when your end also you have a lot of problems, you should not punish the people. We will see some of the findings and we will also read some of the findings. The High Court has categorically held all the people. Whoever has not made any attempt even today, you open a window. Everybody should be allowed to file Tran 1 or revise the Tran 1 up to 30th June 2020. We have another almost 1.5 months. So all the people should approach. So it has directed the Union of India, who is one of the respondents, you publicize this judgment so that all the people, so definitely this benefit of the judgment should not be limited to Delhi alone, and all the people throughout the country should make a representation. Now, all the people, whoever has committed any mistake in Tran 1, whoever has not at all filed any Tran 1, explain the circumstances and make a representation to your commissioner by quoting this Delhi High Court judgment, and the credit should be allowed. And we sincerely hope for COVID, the government is giving lot of relief measures, and this is something which is our due. It's our own credit. So in fact, when I wrote one of the article, the title of that article I put as giving them what their dues is no alms. So we are not seeking for any alms here. We are not wanting any COVID relief in this particular regard. It is our credit. We have already taken. So please allow them. Don't just say that you should have filed, you should have technical glitches, evidence and all should be there. So government should be little magnanimous. That is our hope. They should accept this judgment and extend the relief. After all, it is due to all the people. We are asking only what is still. There are some skeptics. So skeptics will always be there. So there are some questions. In fact, somebody has asked in the chat box also. I'm not saying that they are a skeptic, but it is their own doubt. They may say, so this High Court judgment has not noted another retrospective amendment. In the recent 2020 budget, another retrospective amendment has been made in section 1. See the government's resolve not to allow the transitional credit time limit. So earlier, the time limit was prescribed only under Rule 117. Section 140 does not deal with any time limit, only the rule. So there was a view, when the statute does not prescribe any time limit, can the delegated legislation prescribe a time limit? That was the question. In fact, some of the high courts have given the relief on that ground also. So they made another retrospective amendment and added the word within such a time under section 140. So Rule 117, statutory backing for the time limit prescribed under Rule 117 has been made into section 141 also. So still there are questions. So after this retrospective amendment, what will happen to the Delhi High Court judgment? Because the Delhi High Court has made certain observations saying that when the statute does not prescribe a time limit, prescribing it by way of delegated legislation is not permissible. So once this amendment comes into effect, what will happen? So if we need an answer for this particular question, we have to read very carefully the finding of the Delhi High Court. So see, I'll just read from the Delhi High Court judgment, 2 slides. Lastly, we also find merit in the submission of the petitioner that Rule 1117, whereby the mechanism for availing the credit has been prescribed, is procedural and directory and cannot affect the substantive right of the registered taxpayers to avail the vested SENVAT credit. Section 141 is categorical. It states that registered person shall be entitled to take in his electronic credit ledger the amount of SENVAT credit carried forward in the return relating to the period ending with the day immediately preceding. Only the manner, that is the procedure of carrying forward, was left to be provided by using the words in such a manner as may be prescribed. Further, even in ALD automotive, while dealing with the question of whether the provision of prescribing time limit for claim of ITC is directory or mandatory in nature, it was observed by the Supreme Court that whether particular provision is mandatory or directory has to be determined on the basis of object of particular provision and design of the statute, and such interpretation should not be put which may promote the public mischief and cause public inconvenience and defeat the main object of the statute. Therefore, in the present cases, the purpose of the transitory provision is to allow a smooth migration from the erstwhile service tax regime to the new GST regime, and the interpretation must be in consonance with that particular purpose. Going forward, the High Court also observed, we therefore have no hesitation in reading down the said provision, Rule 1117, as being directory in nature, insofar as it prescribes the time limit for transitioning of credit, and therefore the same would not result in forfeiture of the rights in case the credit is not availed within the period prescribed. This, however, does not mean that availing of SENVAT credit in perpetuity. Transitory provisions, as the word indicates, have to be given its due meaning. Transition from pre-GST regime to GST regime has not been smooth, and therefore what was reasonable in ideal circumstances is not in the current situation. Maruti may say, my car will run for 20 kilometers per liter, but it will never happen because that ideal circumstances can never be there in practice. So in the absence, that is not there in the High Court, I am reading. In the absence of any specific provision under the Act, please note, in the absence of any specific provisions under the Act, we would have to hold that in terms of the residuary provisions of the Limitation Act, the period of 3 years should be the guiding principle, and thus a period. See, now, even in the retrospective amendment, they are not saying 3 years under Section 140. It only says as may be prescribed. So it is a delegated legislation, and once it is held to be in a directory and not, it is only a procedural thing, even after this particular amendment, going by these observations where the High Court has noted the transition to GST is a special situation. It is not a normal situation. So even after that particular amendment, the benefit of Delhi High Court judgment would still be available. If somebody is still having any doubt, I have to request only our Honorable Prime Minister to come to my rescue. What he said in January 2016, retrospective tax is a matter of past. That chapter will not be opened again. We are ensuring that neither this government nor the future governments can open this chapter. This is what our Prime Minister has said in January 2006 for the business community. But please see the way in which retrospective amendments are being done in GST law. I don't know whether all these amendments are with the knowledge of the Prime Minister. Certainly it may not be. These are all highly technical amendments. So definitely the Finance Ministry should note. I sincerely hope the Finance Minister as well as the officials are aware of this particular policy statement told by none other than the Prime Minister of our country, and please be reasonable and allow this transitional credit. Whether it is education says or the balance, don't go by strict timeline. This is my humble request to all the people who are in the policy making domain to kindly note, we are not asking which is something which is not our due. You check the claim. You cost 200% verification whether the credit is eligible or not. Please don't put any timelines and please give one window. This will be more better than any COVID relief which the government has been giving over a period of time. And I am taking to my support none other than the Prime Minister of our country. So we hope that all these litigations on this transitional credit will be avoided and all the people will get relief. That is my hope. And I also had other few slides on other transitory provisions. They are not much relevant for the transitional credit, and it all deals with what will happen to the old litigation, what will happen to the refund claim spending, and lot of other transitional provisions are there, which are not with reference to any transitional credit. But with this, I am stopping the session. If time permits, we will go back to these slides. But as of now, I will stop it with this particular. So now we are covering the transitional credit part of our discussion. Now we have some interaction, and if time permits, we can go back to these slides. Prithvi, and you can update me with the questions if any.
Yes, sir. I mean, you can read the entire chat box and see that how wonderful your presentation was. I need not read it again. So thank you to all the participants. So now I think we can take up the question and answers first, and then if time permits, then we can proceed on if we have the same number of participants. So participants, you can raise your hands in the app, and you can resend your queries, the queries which you've already sent earlier. We could have missed it. So you can resend your queries so that we can take up each and every questions if time permits. So I think, sir, we will first go with the raise hand option so that we can unmute them and they can ask the questions. Sir.
Yeah.
So Mr. Murugan. Mr. Murugan?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You're able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes,
sir. Sir, there is a car dealer in Coimbatore. He has purchased Hello? Kekada, sir?
Not very clear.
Hello?
Come back.
Hello?
Yeah. Tell me, sir. Tell me now.
Sir, there's a car dealer. Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Tell.
This car dealer has purchased different type of cars over a period of time. On 1/7/2017, he has availed credit based on the CTD and Tran 3 issued by the supplier. Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But this fellow was not able to file the Tran 1. So the department conducted an audit. They have issued a letter. Fortunately, he was allotted to the state. Therefore, there is no action taken now. So whether in the present circumstances, will he be able to file the Tran 3 also?
Definitely, sir. The ratio of the judgment, even though it talks only about Tran 1, the fundamental principles are credit is a vested right. Credit is a vested right, and it should not be restricted by the time limits. That is what the categorical finding of the Delhi High Court. So please make a representation by referring to this particular judgment,
Correct.
and also file one manual Tran 1
Sure.
and manual Tran 3 along with your letter, along with the representation. Please file one Tran 1 and Tran 3 in manual, and let us see what action is being taken by the department on that. We have to wait and see. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Greatly obliged, sir. Greatly obliged. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can we close the screen sharing, sir? That for this.
Yeah,
question?
I'll close it. I'll close
Yes.
it.
Sir,
Just a minute.
we'll take up question of
Yes.
Mr. Gokarnation, sir.
Yes, sir.
Gokarnation, sir.
Yes. Sir, Natarajan,
Yes, sir.
good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
My simple query is, education cess and she's education cess have been consumed, subsumed with basic excise duty or basic service tax, right?
Yes.
This is the issue.
Yes. Hmm.
And the proviso to Rule 3 very clearly says any receipt of education cess, goods on which education cess is paid can be taken and utilized. The only problem is with regard to the closing balance available as on the date, I could not utilize it. The government is not allowing me to utilize the credit. Then there is a discrimination between the credit already earned and kept in closing balance and the credit received subsequent to the amendment. That is one point. Second is, when closing balance is allowed to utilize, when subsequent receipt is allowed to be utilized, why not the closing balance? That is one question. Second is, it is a right, as you rightly said, HR case, everything, Supreme Court says once a credit is earned, it is a right to me to utilize the same. Now, the problem is only to transit the credit to the GST provision. Okay, when it is not possible to transit to GST provisions, still it is lying as unutilized closing balance the existing service tax return or excise return. Suppose when a factory is closed prior to the GST era, they can go for a refund of the unutilized credit available as on the date of the closure, all these things. So why not we go for a refund procedure so that the credit is already earned by me and no way it is said it cannot be utilized in any of the service tax rules or any of the GST rules. The credit cannot be utilized. There is no provision like that. So why not we go for a refund mechanism?
Yes, sir.
To get back the credit.
Yes. Your first question, when government to some extent allowed utilization of education cess for the goods received after 1/3/2015, there is a discrimination. Why not allow the closing balance also? Exactly.
Yes.
This was the argument taken before the Delhi High Court in the Cellular Operator Association case also, but the court was not inclined. They said that once there was a restriction that education cess cannot be used for payment of excise duty, just because partially it has been allowed, it does not mean that it has to be allowed fully. So that is what the Delhi High Court decision. And after that, what will happen, whether any appeal has been filed, we have to wait for it. This is on the first point. On the second issue, yes, claiming refund is also one of the option. But on the issue, once closure of the factory, whether the closing balance lying in the balance can be given as a refund or not, on that there are mixed case laws. Both ways there are decisions. There are some decisions allowing such refund, and there are some decisions which say that such credit cannot be given. So the jurisprudence on that is yet to evolve. The final word on that is yet to evolve. So definitely that option can also be tried, and we can also try this Delhi High Court route also. And if one route is successful, we can always withdraw the other route. So definitely we can also file a refund claim and try that option also. So it is not ruled out. That can also be tried. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
there are a few queries in the chat box also.
Yeah, I'll read one by one. The AOs are now issuing notices for the Tran 1 filed cases, and they are telling that they will not accept the TDS credit available for contractors for which we filed a Tran 1. Is the denial is correct? It is not correct. The TDS balance is also part of your VAT return. Your VAT return will show how much TDS credit you have. That should also be allowed. So definitely it has to be contested by way of filing an appeal. That is one. And I will just go back in the chat window. Tran 1 not filed earlier, but filing now to be in place of business or place of registration in the GST regime. So you have to file Tran 1 only under your new registration. Wherever you want to carry forward that particular credit, In that place, in that jurisdiction, you have to file. If that old credit has to be verified by a different, see, for example, now you are under the state jurisdiction and you are claiming the education cess balance. So you have to make the claim only to the state jurisdictional officer, and definitely they don't know how much education cess you are having. So they have to coordinate with the central government to check whether that balance was correctly available, whether it was eligible and all those. So now the claim has, maybe you can submit a copy also. So file it with your current jurisdiction, also give a copy to your old jurisdiction also. So that will be a correct way of approach.
Sir, I have sent one question, sir, to you.
Just now,
Okay.
now, whether the presentation is available in YouTube. So definitely we will be
No.
uploading it in the YouTube.
That is not the query, but when the service tax was already paid and invoice is issued before the appointed date of GST and subject
So,
service also
no,
received prior
no,
to
what I
one-
request, it is,
Yes, sir.
it is, no, 1 minute. It is little difficult to go back to the old chats. It takes some time. So anybody's question which has not been answered, please copy and post it once again. And
Sir, I
Prithvi
have
also,
sent
I
you
think you
one-
have posted earlier.
Now
Just
I
a
again
minute.
to you personally. I'll again post it, sir. I'll send it to you personally.
No. Yeah, send it to everyone otherwise. I have not got it. You might have sent to my mobile. I'm seeing it in the laptop.
Oh, okay. I'll send it to your laptop then. Sorry.
Yeah.
1 minute, sir. I'll just send
Sir,
it.
can we, this is another question. Yeah, sir, can we file revised return one before June 20? Yes, definitely. File it manually by relying upon the Delhi High Court judgment. Okay. When the service tax was already paid and invoice is issued before the appointed date of GST and subject to service also received prior to 1/7, but the invoice is physically received after the appointed date. Whether credit of such service tax can be taken under GST law. Appears section 145 does not specifically covers that situation, because 145 covers the services received after 1/7. Tax was paid before 1/7, but service was received after 1/7. It is strictly not covered under. But here, had that credit been taken in your ST3 return earlier also, if you had that particular invoice, you would have taken in your ST3 and you would have carried forward under 141. It should have been covered under 141. And because of some lacunae, you are not able to do that. So now you file a representation, claim it both under 141, either under 147 or under 140Y. Try to cover it under both the situation and file a revised return manually by relying upon the Delhi High Court judgment. That will be the way out. And next question, will the amendment in section 40 have the effect on the current judgment as the same has not been? That is what I have explained very well. So even though the recent retrospective amendment was not before the Delhi High Court in the recent decision, if you read the Delhi High Court judgment very clear, so that will withstand even the retrospective amendment also. In my humble view, the findings of the Delhi High Court was very categorical. So they are holding that it is a substantive right and time limit is only procedural and not any statutory provision. So based on those findings, definitely, even after that recent amendment, Delhi High Court should survive, in my humble view.
Sir,
In
now we
pre-GST
can we pause for a second, sir?
Yeah.
Sir, Jaykumar sir wants to come in and I think he wants to supplement a few points. And then
Yeah.
Sundareswaran sir also wants to come in. So can we
Yes.
can we start that?
Sure,
sir,
sure,
and
sure.
I can take up.
Sure. Yeah.
JK sir?
Hello.
Yes, sir, JK sir.
Oh, thank you. Natte,
Yes.
one of the chat from Mallikarjun Reddy says,
Hmm.
please post the greetings later because all the questions are getting immersed in such greetings.
Yeah, I was not able to read it.
No, that shows that how much good was the presentation. My congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Now, I'll just have one question, adding from Gokarnesan. See, this refund, I mean, what to say, he asked about the refund, but you were advocating that it should also be given as a credit in the GST regime. I'm talking about the she cess and the higher education cess. My only question is, these two cesses are for some specific purpose. All cesses are for purpose. For automobile cess, go to the automobile industry, like that. We all know that. Education industry is for a particular purpose, that is for higher education and secondary education. Now, earlier also in the legacy laws or the STOI laws, that BED can be used to discharge she says or he says, not otherwise. Meaning these cesses has the limitation of being used only to discharge that specific cess, because end of the day it has to go and reach that pool. Now with the subsuming of this all taxes into a GST regime, if she says and that he says are going to be allowed as a credit into the GST pool, whether the color of that she says and he says would get lost. And that is the reason why they have stopped and adamant, I won't say that word, they were very firm that these two cesses should not be allowed because they are meant for that purpose, and there is no more cess on that same color in GST. And that is why it is stopped. This is my, I want you to
definitely. It's a very valid point.
Yes.
We all know that when cess is levied, it is levied for a specific purpose. And in fact, the government is not obliged to share the cess revenue from the state also. So they will retain it and they will be using it for that particular purpose. And if the revenue generation was, I will answer it in two parts. The first part, if the revenue generation, we want to meet the requirements of education, we want to levy the tax. At the first point itself, it should have been kept out of any ITC mechanism. Even within education cess and secondary cess also, they might not have given any benefit. They would have kept it totally outside. It's a revenue generating measure. But to some limited extent, within education cess, they have allowed the credit. That is one particular point. Though it may not be very much helpful for me, I will start with that. And secondly, if you approach it from the business point of view, when you are running the business, when this type of uncertainties occur, till date, I have been taking the credit. All the credit is part of my current assets. It is all part of my working capital. I have the working capital in my books of accounts. Based on that, I do lot of projections. I tell my bank that my current assets are so strong and give me some cash loan. And based on that, I do the business. So this balance of CENVAT credit is an important component of my working capital. And one fine day, suddenly, if the government is going to say that I am going to withdraw that particular benefit from your books of account, all my projections go awry. So how a person will be able to do his business? See, this is an indirect tax. This is an indirect tax. Today, my income tax rate is 20%. I plan a lot of things. Income tax is only on my profit. It is not on my gross amount. Suddenly, if my income tax rate is hiked from 20% to 25%, I may have to do some more savings. I cannot complain about it. But in an indirect tax regime, my projections and my business, everything is based on the tax policy of the government. And one fine day, if you are going to take away a particular right, that will have very huge ramifications for my business. I would have done a lot of projections based on that. My selling price is based on that. I am facing my competition because of this particular factor. I know that I am eligible for this much of credit. I do a lot of projections. And when you snatch that particular right on one particular date, whether it will be a violation of the right guaranteed to me under Article 19(1)(g). So that is the bigger question which has to be challenged. So anyway, I'm not saying the final word on that. You have raised a very, very valid point. And in fact, the next questioner, Mr. Sundareswaran, will also be banking on that, I believe. So once it is for a purpose, how can we give it? That is a valid point. For that, my counter is, this is one. By saying so, you are infringing upon my fundamental right of carrying upon my business. That is one thing. And second, government should always be the protector of everybody. You should protect the interest of the citizen. You should protect the business. They are the wealth creators. And in fact, the finance minister says in the budget speech, you are the wealth creators of this particular country. So the government has to be a little magnanimous. And when consciously, all these cesses were subsumed into excise duty and service tax. As you move towards the GST, a larger view should be taken and that credit should have been allowed. Yes, very valid point you have raised, which will be agitated in future before the Supreme Court. But these are my counters from my side and hope it may not be a satisfactory answer. Still, you have a valid point still. And in fact, Sundareswaran also may be substantiating a bit more on that. And this is my counter for me. Yes.
Thank you.
Now
Thank you.
to Sundareswaran.
Sundareswaran sir, I've unmuted you, sir.
Yeah, can I, are you able to
Yes.
hear now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, it was very inspiring and the way of thinking was also extremely good. Really, one needs sure appreciation. But my doubt is, was there any time limit during the CENVAT credit rules to avail the CENVAT credit?
No, yes, I will answer.
No,
For
no, no,
some
wait, wait,
time,
wait. Number one.
for-
Right.
Yes, okay.
Then, see, and the courts and tribunal avail that it is mandatory. If you don't avail it, you are out. Number one. Then number two is, my understanding of the literal reading of section 140 is take avail immediately, right? And at the first instance, they also have the power to enact rules or regulations with retrospective effect, is as per what the Act says. Now, at the first instance, Rule 117 said 90 days, 90 days, right? Then it was extended from December up to 3 times, up to December 2017,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
under these circumstances, whether could it be said that it is a vested right and I have the right after sleeping over the matter? That is why my the standards department made. That is why committee was IT committee was constituted, and if there are evidence to prove that they have made an attempt, they will be entitled to. So, first question is there any vested right under the tax enactment to avail certain benefit? Number one. Number two is there fundamental right as envisaged under Article 19 in tax regime, especially after the Jindal case. Then number four is when the Act itself says immediately, and having peep into the erstwhile repealed Senva credit rules, which says that 90 days, 1 year, 6 months, they had limit, and the court interpreted that you don't have the right after that. Then there is also one judgment of Supreme Court, if my understanding is correct, Oswal Surya some Surya Oswal something will come like that, where the very question was also tested. The Supreme Court said there is no doubt you have the right, but the limitation is only to take away that right. It doesn't have any vested right for the period which is covered by limitation. Yes, sir, I want to.
Yes, I will answer now. Yes, I will answer. Okay. The first thing, prescribing a time limit per se is not bad.
Yes.
So there has to be certainty in law. That is also one of the attributes of any law. There has to be a certainty. So prescribing a time limit for taking the credit per se is not at all bad. And there are decisions to that particular aspect. Now coming to the earlier law, was there any time limit to take the credit? Starting from the days of 1986 onward, it was in between. Sometime there was a time limit. In between there was no time limit. And finally, again, there was a time limit introduced somewhere in 2014. Credit has to be taken within 1 year. So prescribing a time limit per se is not bad. And in my view, those time limits prescribed under the law for taking the credit for the first time are valid. I'm not doubting on that particular aspect. Now, the point is, when we are asking for transitioning the credit, it is not about taking the credit. The credit has already been taken. Whatever was the time limit prescribed under the central Senva credit rules, that has been followed within the 1 year time limit. The credit has already been taken. And now what we are asking is now transitioning it. So this is only a procedure at the time of introduction of GST law with so much of complications and all that. A right which has already been taken, a credit which has already been validly taken within the time limit, that should be allowed to be carried forward. And for carrying it forward, again, there should not be another time limit. That is the point. So, as I said, the time limit per se is not bad. And again, what I read from this Delhi High Court judgment, they also said so. The time limit per se is not bad. You have to see the circumstances. So we are in a very peculiar circumstances where everybody was having the doubts. Even at the government end also there were doubts. The portal was not functioning. In that specific peculiar circumstances, prescribing a time limit is not proper.
But I do not know how far the Delhi High Court order will have gone, because it has travelled beyond the. I don't think the way the order was passed was correct. Though I am not entitled to comment on it. How can they prescribe a 3 year time limit? It's totally beyond the power under 226. If it is 142, Supreme Court can say anything. But how can the court in 226 say that? A number of judgment on that point. I do not know what made them to pass such an order like that. Anyway, thank you, sir. Thank you for the
interesting days are ahead. We'll see.
Sir, I want to supplement this question. Even assuming it is a accumulated credit, what is the wrong in fixing a certain time limit? Even assuming it is like considered as setting one more time limit, then how long we can permit? So up to what point? There should be certainty in taking a credit. Nobody is denying the fact that it is your accumulated credit. There are many judgments to that effect. but there should be certainly a time limit for that. What is the rationale to say that how long the people will take time to understand the GST provisions? So therefore, already the sufficient time has been credited to thrice. So if you want to avail any credit thereafter, the assessee must come with a reasonable cost for not availing within time. So this aspect can be explained, sir.
Yes, yes. It is not endless. Hardly another 1.5 months. It's hardly another 1.5 months. It is not endless. The High Court has applied the general limitation prescribed period of 3 years. So definitely after 3 years, if somebody is going to claim, definitely that is going to be very, very difficult unless he is able to prove any peculiar circumstances. So it is not endless. Anything has to be certain validly. The time limit has to be there. But considering the circumstances, overall circumstances, a 3 years general limitation period of 3 years, the court found it to be reasonable, and I also feel that it is reasonable. Definitely stretching it beyond 3 years will be very, very difficult. So 3 years, I feel it is a reasonable time considering the amount of litigation, the number of writs filed, peculiar circumstances. Each case is unique. Everybody is coming out with a peculiar case of their own. So considering all these factors, I think 3 years is reasonable, and beyond that, even I don't subscribe.
So up to July 2020, it will be over.
Yes.
Yes. Anybody if has not filed, they have to do no.
Yes. Any other questions?
Aparna ma'am had a few points. I have unmuted her. Ma'am, if you want to add something, ma'am. Aparna ma'am.
So probably Aparna madam would have wanted to focus that the Sutherland judgment was stayed by a division bench. So that may be
Yes. Maybe.
yes. And the declaration writ is also pending. So that also.
Sir, the one question I'll just send it to you, and then we can, I think, end the session. From Mallikarjun Reddy. I will just send it to you, sir.
Yeah.
A long question.
Long question.
Sorry.
I think she's come.
Yes,
I'm
madam.
so sorry. I was on a call. Tell me, sir.
No,
You
ma'am,
had some
if you wanted to
queries.
supplement something, because in between you had some points to add. So if you...
No, nothing. Actually, that Sutherland case, we have got a stay. We filed a writ
Yes.
of division bench. and,
APS mentioned just now.
Yeah.
Thank you,
That's all.
ma'am.
That's what I wanted.
Thank you.
I don't want to mention more on that because I'm involved in that case.
Yes,
So I
ma'am.
don't want to say anything more on the merits of the case.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Sir, I have sent you the question, sir.
So, in effect, that long query, but the long and short of it is, I have received various services. I have not taken the credit, or I was not eligible to take the credit. Now I am going to use that credit after 1st July. It's a producer of a movie. So can I take the credit now? But unfortunately, there is no concept of services in stock. We can understand input in stock. Whatever input I have purchased, I have not taken the credit. They are lying in stock as on 1st July 2017. But I have not taken the credit earlier because I was not eligible. Now I am eligible to take the credit. That concept is understandable. But even though it is very genuine, I have received some services. All the services will be useful to me only now onwards, after July 2017. But earlier I was not able to take the credit because my service was not liable. But now I am going to get the benefit of those services. There is no mechanism provided for that because it is very difficult to provide it because services are intangible. There is no concept of input services in stock. That all will complicate the issues further. So only for input it has been provided, not for input services. So even though it's a genuine grievance, it is not possible.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one last question from Balaji, sir. Balaji, sir, I've unmuted you, sir. Balaji. Sir, in the meanwhile, can we take one question more?
Yeah.
From Mr. Abhishek. In pre-GST, we were having taxable and exempt supply both and not in GST. all supplies became taxable. Am I eligible to take 100%?
Definitely under yes, under 140 subsection 4, whatever credit you have not taken earlier for the inputs, because they are used only for the exempted goods, and whatever is the stock available on that particular date, 1st July 2017, where you have not taken the credit, you are eligible under subsection 4. If you have not taken earlier, now based on this, you can make a claim.
One more quick
Cess
question.
credit.
Mine now?
Yeah.
Will the 30th June 20 period be ipso jure extended by Supreme Court order extending limitation during
No,
the
whether it that all depends upon whether the COVID is continue to keep us busy and all. No, don't take such chances and all. Try to do it
Yes,
before 30th June. Already we are getting a lot of benefits, and try to do it before 30th June.
Thank you, sir.
May I now-
Balaji sir, yes sir.
Yes, there is one case where the AO has told that I will have to approve your Tran 1 credit. Thereafter only you should approve. You should upload it. The assessee taking that letter was waiting. Eventually, though the AO did not have power to issue such notice, he also did not upload it. Remedy, sir.
No, earlier there was no such a thing. You have to file it in the portal, and automatically it will be credited.
That's
there is
right,
no
sir,
question of
but
any
the-
pre-verification.
But assessing
No,
officer
because the
unfortunately
AO
issued
told
a
us
letter
Yeah.
saying that unless I make a pre-verification, you should not.
Because of that, he has not filed, right?
Yes.
Okay. So definitely, once the direction has been issued in writing, he can quote that in the representation now. Because the AO has said so, I was waiting for that. Because of that reason, I have not filed it.
Pending a writ petition in this connection, can the assessee still file Tran 1 now?
Definitely,
Manual Tran 1?
definitely let them file. In that petition, let them also mention that I have also filed a writ petition in this regard. And if the credit is going to be allowed on the basis of the Delhi High Court judgment, I am prepared to withdraw that writ petition. And simultaneously, whenever the matter comes up for hearing, we can also mention to the High Court, I have also made a representation like this in the meanwhile. So we will keep both the places informed, and definitely he can make a representation now.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So I think we have almost completed. I mean, there are few queries still left. Sir, I think one question is regarding Delhi judgment. Mr. Karan wants to ask. We take up that, sir. Depending
Yeah.
time.
It's going to be, yeah.
I'll just answer.
No, time for me, it's not an issue, but the people are waiting for 2 hours nearly. Let him
Yes, sir. I think last question we'll take up and then we'll conclude this session, sir.
Here, is my voice audible?
Yes.
With regard to the Delhi judgment. Good afternoon, sir. I had only one question with regard to the Delhi judgment, is that they had used the term property and vested right. Now, what I understand from terminology, vested right is that something, a right which is contingent upon a law, cannot be called a vested right. It can only be recognized and de-recognized by a law. So here, if the timelines are not recognized by law, then where is the concept of vested right arising with regard to transitional credit?
So this particular right to take that particular Senvan credit under the old law, it was not based on any legal contingency. Whatever was the legal position, all those conditions have been complied with. It was an eligible credit under the old law. It has been taken. There is no contingency attached to it at all. So once a credit is validly taken as per the legal provisions, it attained the character of a vested right because there is no contingency attached to it. Suppose if this credit is subject to a particular condition, there is nothing like that. All those conditions have been complied with. You have to make the payment within 180 days. You have to receive the inputs. You have to take the credit within 1 year. All those have been complied with and credit is validly taken. Once that credit is validly taken under the old provisions, it becomes a vested right. And there is no more contingency to it.
No, sir. Assuming if section 140 was not there, then how would one transfer the credit? Assuming on a very hypothetical situation, I understand. But the vested right, also for it to accrue in a different form, it has to be recognized by the upcoming law. So now in section 140, they have not they have recognized it as entitled credit, which is why it's getting transferred. If 140 was not there, would you have the same basis of saying that I had a vested right in terms of the Senvat credit rules, and which is why I can still transfer credit?
No, that would have been a different situation. If no transition was provided, our challenge would be it should have been provided. So the very purpose of moving towards the GST, if you see various documents, policy documents and all, the intention has always been to make a proper way for a transition. So assuming that no provisions have been done, then our argument would have been our vested right has not been recognized by the GST law at all. You have just given it a go by. So it should have been allowed. So that way it should have been contested. But now that situation is not there. It is had it not been there, our difference would have been different. Our difference would have been different. But that difference also would have been based on the principle of vested right. It was a vested right under the old law. You should have provided for it. The absence of any provision to carry forward is not good. That way it should have been argued.
So just a small addition to this in continuation. When I understand the vested right, they have also used the term property. Now, property technically means something which is pass onable, a right, and here in this case where you cannot transfer credit to one person to another. So here vested right has been used with the in conjunction with the term property. And if we see property, then when you buy a property, it is a vested right. It cannot be extinguished very easily. Only in case of emergency, that is an extraordinary power. But here, if we see that it is not a property, so the Delhi High Court is calling my transitional credit my property. A property is something which gets transferred from one person to another, the ownership. So in that sense, I don't think it is a property as well. From that basis, not a vested right.
Not necessarily. Whatever I own, it might not have been transferred. I acquire. That is one way of acquiring the property. But here, this property has been acquired legally by following the legal provisions. It does not always mean that if there is a property, it should have been transferred to me in some way or other. And moreover, the person remains the same. You might have obtained a new registration under the GST law, but as an entity, the person pre-GST and post-GST, the person is the same. And whatever was my property under the old law, it should continue to be my property under the new law also. That is the underlying principle. And anyway, no final word yet on any of these aspects. And all these are highly debatable issues. And we have to finally wait for what the Supreme Court is going to say on that. And as you said, these are all the different ways it can be argued.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Natarajan sir. Sir, I think we can end the session now. I thank you once again, sir, for the session. Again, a very lively session, which you always do with your wits and humors here and there. And then taking the support of
thank you all for the patient hearing for
country, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also. So I think that was a really very, very appreciable point. And I have, and to all the participants, we are going to upload this video on YouTube, or this session on YouTube also. I request Nitin to kindly share the link in the chat box. You can subscribe to our channel. Our channel is called as Madras Tax Bar Chennai. So you can search that on YouTube. We will be sharing the link also here. You can access to that link and subscribe to the channel. We have already uploaded most of our seminars in our channel. Even this will be uploaded as early as possible. So thank you once again. Srinivas sir, you wanted to tell something, sir?
The next programs will be posted in the group, the coming sessions.
So the coming programs, as stated by Srinivas sir, we will post it in the group, and then it will be shared. I again request, Nitin, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, he has posted. It is there in the chat.
All right. I think Nitin has already posted in the chat box. You can subscribe to our channel by using that link, and then you can have a look at all our webinars. So I thank once again all the participants for joining us again today, this morning on a Monday morning, and I thank Natarajan sir for this wonderful session. We will see you all soon for the next session. The details will be updated very soon. So thank you once again, sir. I'm ending this session now.